It's with great pleasure that I welcome back Dr. Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert, the title sponsor of the College Admissions Process podcast. Sean, you have a special message for the listeners?
Hey, John, I just wanted to mention for all the parents and students who are listening to this great podcast, we have a really special offer only for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast for Prep Expert. So if your student is going to be taking an online SAT, ACT, PSAT course anytime soon, or is looking for one-on-one tutoring with top 1% tutors, head over to prepexpert.com. We offer live online courses for every college admissions exam. On top of that, we have the best score guarantees, best curriculum, and best instructors in the test prep industry. And just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast, you can get 20% off any online SAT or PSAT or ACT course, as well as one-on-one tutoring. So you can get 20% off. Just make sure you use the promo code College Talk. That's one word, College Talk, and you'll get 20% off just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast. And I hope you guys can use that to your advantage, save a bunch of money at prepexpert.com.
Thank you so much, Sean. And to everyone out there, once again, that promo code is College Talk. That's one word, College Talk. Thank you all, and best wishes. Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce you today, Veronica Hauad, who's the Deputy Dean of Admissions at the University of Chicago. Veronica, it was so great to meet you at NACAC, and even more exciting to finally have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, John, for this kind of fun stuff. My dog and I will get up early. We're ready. We're excited.
Well, I think it's the first time that we have a dog on the podcast. So welcome to the dog. Veronica, what is the dog's name, by the way?
Her name is Maggie.
All right. Maggie is with us with Veronica. So let's get right to it because the listeners want to hear about all the great things that UChicago has to offer both inside and outside of your classroom. So Veronica, UChicago has long emphasized intellectual curiosity, rigorous inquiry, and the life of the mind. How do those core values show up in everyday student life, both inside and outside of your awesome classrooms?
Sure. UChicago is just such a classic liberal arts institution, like it classically, firmly, traditionally liberal arts. It's what I think a lot of us who work for liberal arts colleges tell the students and families we're working with. You know, you're not just having conversations about academics, intellectual conversations in the classroom. It spills over like into your dorm and into your dining hall and your other conversations with friends. That was certainly true. I mean, prior to this, I started my career at my alma mater at Kenyon College in Ohio. Again, very much liberal arts. And we would say that at Kenyon, like it just happens, it happens. And then I came here and I was like, oh yes, it really happens. These kids are definitely talking about all of this in their lives outside of the classroom. I think it's also not just a function, it's not just the action, like, oh, we talk about academics. It's also the way these students think. Everything is something they kind of want to pick apart and talk about and are curious about. That curiosity runs pretty deep at liberal arts in general. And I find it very profound here in the students at UChicago.
Well, you're definitely one of the best liberal arts colleges, and the core curriculum is central to UChicago's academic identity. Veronica, can you walk us through how the core is structured, why it matters, and how it shapes a student's intellectual development during their time on campus?
When we're speaking with students and families, we try to explain the grand scheme of liberal arts in the U.S. So you have some schools that are open curriculum colleges. They have all these great departments, all these great offerings, but you get to choose what you're going to take and what you're not going to take. They're not going to assign any particular subject to you. Most liberal arts colleges in the U.S. will fall in the middle. So you have 3, 4, 5 subject areas, very broad, that you have to achieve before you graduate from whatever major you're going to pick. UChicago keeps company with a handful of schools that has a pretty extensive core curriculum. So we have 8 areas of subject study that all students here have to complete. Used to be 9. And you really have to make sure when you're coming to this kind of school that you want to continue learning the way you've been learning K through 12. Like you see value in other subjects. Our students are still very goal oriented. Some of them come with their major in mind or their career in mind, grad school goals in mind. And that's all fine. That's all great. We're happy to help them with that. But they're the type of student who also understands to be that thing. There's also to be well-rounded and to be fulfilled and try other things. The course is extensive. It is 3 different quantitative requirements: math, a biological sciences requirement, and a physical sciences requirement. So they even separate out the sciences. So it's 3 quantitative requirements. It's a lot. We have 3 reading and writing-based requirements. There's humanities, social sciences, and an area we call civilizations. There's a foreign language requirement that's pretty popular in the landscape of liberal arts. Prove that you have at least this intro level ability in a non-English language. And then we have a fine arts requirement that either you want to produce or appreciate the fine arts. The 9th area used to be a swim test. It was in place when I started here many years ago. It was the least favorite part of the core, and I'm really glad for many reasons we no longer have it. Should you know how to swim? Yes. We're off of a large body of water, Lake Michigan. But for it to be in the core, that was a little odd for many students. But 8 is a lot. 8 is still a lot. And it takes up about a third of the coursework that a student will take in their course of 4 years at UChicago. So it's a big commitment. And it's saying that, yes, you still see value in being well-rounded, in learning new things, in being curious. That's different. I've worked with a lot of students in my family, in my community, who are really happy to get to college and never take a certain subject again. And that just wouldn't work at a place like UChicago.
Well, that's a terrific overview. And obviously, the 8 core curriculum pieces are so important to the UChicago values and your mission. So UChicago is obviously a very difficult school to get into. It's very competitive. You get so many applications, which we'll talk a little bit about later. If a student is able to demonstrate their understanding throughout the application, that they really understand the core of your curriculum and why it resonates with them and what they intend to do with that curriculum once they're on your campus. And I know there's no guarantees, right? But how important is it for a student to demonstrate that understanding in their overall application, Veronica?
It's a big part of our assessment in admissions. So I assess differently here than I did at my alma mater at Kenyon when I was in their admissions office. Because there, although the students were all very high achieving, great people, they were coming into an environment where the general education requirements were much looser. If you weren't good at math or never wanted to take math again, guess what? There was a way in which you could take other quantitative subjects and not take math. So it didn't have to factor so prominently into my evaluation. Whereas being at a school that has a pretty extensive core, I have to know on a base level that you can successfully get through every part of the core. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to move on to your major. You're not going to be able to move on to the things you want to do here. So that's a big part of the assessment. Can someone get through all parts of the course successfully? And more than just can they get through it, would they enjoy it? You know, there is variation in all parts of general education requirements at college. It's not that everyone is taking the same bio course or the same civ course or the same fine arts classes. You have choice there, but we have to know you're going to be able to do it and that you're going to hopefully get some enjoyment out of doing it as well. That second piece would be ideal. Can you do it as base, but would you enjoy doing it is even better. And it's very much part of how we assess students.
Well, that's terrific. Well, I know a lot of students that are currently there and that have graduated, and they definitely enjoy the UChicago, not only your curriculum, but just the atmosphere, the community that you guys have built there. Now, I also read that one of your many responsibilities has to do with being the director of partnerships and pathway programs, Veronica. So I was just curious because there's a lot of talk at the secondary level. I'm a high school principal, as I think you know, where we're trying to create different opportunities for students in terms of internships. So, for example, if a student wants to major in economics or biological sciences at UChicago, if they're able to demonstrate that they did some level of internship that's related to whatever field they want to major in, and again, I know there's no guarantees in terms of admission, but is that something that would help a student in the overall application process?
I love that you also mentioned economics and biology because those are 2 of our most popular majors at UChicago. So many students come to UChicago thinking, yes, I'm going to study econ or bio. It's interesting because we don't, like most liberal arts colleges, we don't admit by major. So if someone says, I want to study economics at UChicago, I think, of course you do. Why wouldn't you? Of course you found us for economics. But we are not assessing really the student's ability to be an econ major. I'm assessing their ability to get through the core, to do UChicago work, to be a good fit for this particular institution. And then, yes, once a student is here, they're able to choose whatever major you want. But students definitely prepare for certain majors, or at least certain fields, if not specific academic areas of study. I think it's always great for a student to start testing those waters. If you think you want to major in bio and maybe work in the health professions, and maybe, it makes sense to test that out, to start figuring out, well, let me see what this practically looks like before I jump into a very busy and costly endeavor that is college. So that makes sense. I don't know that we're always making that one-to-one assessment, though, that have they prepared for their major. As a school that doesn't have separate colleges of study or admit by major, we don't necessarily have to do that. Now, the reverse, though, is that if a student makes a claim for something that they want to do, a pretty firm claim, and they don't seem prepared for it, that can be an issue. So again, with the students who kind of think about STEM areas of study, I want to go into molecular engineering, I want to do bio, I want to do computer science. To see a student who maybe they haven't had real lab experiences, they haven't advanced very far in their math classes. They don't, like, you start seeing little things that tell me, well, if you want to do this thing, I don't know that you've prepared in the way that will make you successful at UChicago. So while we don't admit or assess by major, which means anything you do is for your sake, like you're trying stuff out. The reverse can be true, that if you make a hard claim for something you want to do, and it doesn't seem you're prepared to do that, well, why would I bring you here to then not be successful? We talk a lot about, especially with those quantitative students, if that's what you want, I want it for you. So I want you to be able to go to a place where the onboarding will make it so that you can do that thing versus coming to a place where I can tell that this would be a challenge.
Well, that's tremendous insight. And I never thought of it that way, which again, I'm going to repeat. Students, if you're going to make a claim, make sure it's backed, right? If you want to go into biological sciences and you have no research experience or anything related to biological sciences, as an example, then that's going to be a red flag in the admissions office. So again, really appreciate that insight. And of course, we know that UChicago, like many other schools, they do this thing called holistic admissions review. Veronica, what does that really look like in practice? In other words, can you share an example of how two very different applicants, maybe one more academic heavy, another with standout essays or extracurriculars, could both be compelling to your admissions team?
I think the somewhat tragic thing is in this type of pool, they're all academic heavy. But families will often ask us, which student do you want? A student who is just top of their class, really amazing, you could tell they're academically just really well prepared. Or the student who they mean the like personal qualities. So it's like, what they do and how they say it and what people think. It's so greedy, but to say that, like, yes, our students are both. Like, they really are both. And that's the reality at selective institutions in the US. So what you're really talking about then is, of the academically capable, strong students, how do you differentiate at that particular level? And that really is where holistic admissions comes in. If we were like the many institutions that had more formulaic admissions processes, I don't know where we would make a cutoff, right? To say GPA rank, ACT, SAT, whatever other factors are in play, like your major other things, I can see where that process works really well at many colleges. Or to say, we're going to take the top 10%, we'll just do holistic outside of the top 10% or whatever it is. Those all work really well for plenty of colleges. But I think particularly for schools where I don't know where I would draw the line. All the students are so very high achieving and curious and wonderful. That is when you differentiate all the academically capable students of like who's the right fit, who gets why they might specifically thrive at a place like UChicago. That's a huge part of the holistic process for us in our supplemental essays and those recommendations, giving the students space to talk, giving other people space to talk, kind of seeing if they understand who we are. And then also they've done that introspective work to understand who they are and how does that fit together. That's really where our holistic process kicks in quite a bit.
Well, that's terrific. And I want to unpackage the holistic process just a little bit. UChicago's supplemental and extended essay prompts are famously creative and sometimes unconventional. My understanding is that you actually survey current students to give you essay prompts. What are you hoping to learn about a student through those essays, and what separates a strong response from one that feels generic?
In terms of the process of producing them, yes, only a UChicago mind can produce them. So every year we have a committee of staff members in our office who run this essay committee. And they ask for ideas from incoming students, current students, and our graduated, our alumni base. So only a UChicago mind can write them. I didn't go here, can't write them. So we pick these essays, and the goal is really like when we think about all of these high academic achieving students, the goal in differentiation is really to see who is good at achieving their goals, right? They're academically high achieving versus who understands how to think. And with these particular questions, it's that you are comfortable or even excited to answer a question that doesn't have a right or wrong answer. I think for many high achieving students, they're really good at knowing what they have to do. They will check off that list and they will get that grade and they will get that test score and they will move toward a goal and they will achieve it. That's one type of learning, one type of successful student. That's all great. But I think within a liberal arts environment, we're really asking more of a student. Are you ready to tackle questions that don't have right or wrong answers? People haven't figured it out before. You and your peers and your faculty and your staff, you all are going to be the innovators. So I think, the essays are that's my favorite part of my job. I've always loved reading essays, but here in particular, those supplemental essays, to see where some of these students take these answers is just fascinating. And I will admit, makes the job much easier. If I sit down and read a certain amount of applications, they're all great students, they're all interesting people. And then you see the supplemental questions and you're like, oh, but you get it. You are a certain kind of thinker. You're going to thrive in a liberal arts environment, a core-based institution with peers who also want to tear apart questions. I think it would be frustrating to be here and to be a student who is only achievement oriented, because sometimes you will do everything right and the outcome is not what you expected, but you're used to doing everything right and getting what the outcome is supposed to be. So I think that's the big goal. How do you think? Do you think like a liberal arts learner, like a UChicago student? And beyond just achieving, are you really capable of creating answers, creating responses, seeing opportunities, living in the gray space instead of being just a black and white kind of student?
Well, students, if you're interested in UChicago, definitely play this answer back because, as Veronica said, she gets tons of applicants that are highly academic on paper in terms of their transcript, in terms of standardized tests if they choose to submit them, which we're going to talk about in a second. But understand that those questions are so important because when you're comparing applicants that have perfect GPAs, have high test scores if they're submitted, what's going to differentiate you? It's how creative you are in responding to those answers, but at the same time, understanding the core values of UChicago, but also showing your ability, your innovation, if you will, in terms of how you answer those very unconventional essay questions. Now, Veronica, with test optional policies in place, how do you advise students on whether or not to submit an SAT or ACT score? And when scores are submitted, how are they weighed in relation to other parts of the overall application?
So we practice, I guess, a version of test optional admissions that is a no harm, right? No harm practice. So that means that if a student can't quite make their choice, they can choose to just submit. And if the testing does not help a student, we omit it from their application. We're like, they probably should have applied test optional. We'll just take it out. So I think our particular flavor of test optional, this no harm test optional, really does make a difference. We also, on our website, we produce not just our average test scores. Those are scary numbers. When you have a highly selective institution that is test optional, people think only the most perfect of scores are worth sending in. And so those can be scary. But we also always have produced the full range of what we admit, not just the average, but what makes up the average. People don't believe us when they see some of the lower range numbers. They are real. They're 100% real. I think even before we went test optional, we're just really comfortable with what testing might look like and what that means as it plays a part with all of the other parts of the application. I think students get confused about how to decide whether or not they should submit at schools that are test optional. They think they should look at the averages that college is reporting, and if they are at or above those averages, they should submit. I think that works at some colleges. That doesn't work at a highly selective institution. So those are overinflated. Our averages did not used to be those numbers before we were test optional. Now they are overinflated numbers. And it makes it seem like those are the numbers we want. We're not saying those are the numbers we want. Those are the numbers that students think they should be submitting. It happens a couple times a cycle that I will read a file where they start with testing and then they want to move to test optional. There is some wiggle room there. And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, that's such good testing. Why would you want to take out that testing? But because it's not at this crazy reported average. I think a way better way for students to start that assessment, your school typically has an average, ACT or SAT. And you may want to look at your school's average and say, where do I fall in my school's average? Because when most colleges in the US read applications of our type, they are reading within a territory, cities, states, or countries. You get used to those schools, you understand students in context, and you are seeing scores at that school that are at that range. It makes it so that when you're reading applications, you might have the same score in two files. One score is on par with what a school produces. That's the average. It's normal, looks good. The other might be the same score, but it is the highest score that school has ever seen. They will say, we don't even know how to help this kid. They are maxing out curriculum. They are top of the class. They're the best test taker we've ever had in our school's history. The impact is so different. So I often tell students, have that conversation with your high school post-secondary counselor, with your IB coordinator, with your teachers. There's a lot of feedback that is wrong that probably says you should meet a college's average. But really, when you talk to professionals who do the work, it's a little bit more about where in context are you producing those scores. I think for colleges that admit by major, that also makes a difference. Are you saying you want to do something that is score-based? Students don't realize that many professions are testing-based. You want to be a doctor, you have a lot of testing coming to you to get into your medical school, to navigate your profession and pick your specialty. Students will tell me not only that they want to do medicine, but that they have a specialty in mind. And I think, the specialty is kind of picked for you. I don't know that you entirely have control over the specialty. So if you are also picking a profession where good testing will help you, that makes a difference. So there's just so many factors here. I know the landscape of test optional is really confusing for students. I think for us, it's no harm. When in doubt, you can submit. We will make you test optional if we need to. And really think a little bit more about what your scores represent within the context of the application you're submitting. So maybe your high school average is a better range that you are looking at to assess versus a college's average, especially if that school is highly selective.
Well, I really appreciate that answer. You gave so many pieces of advice and insights. Also, the context that you shared is awesome. Number one, you are a no harm school. In other words, you have a no harm policy. Students, that indicates that they are, in fact, test optional. So many students believe that that is a myth, but here you have Veronica, straight from UChicago, explaining their no harm policy. And the fact is that the scores that are on your website are totally skewed because those are scores from students that basically said, okay, this is good enough for me to submit. So obviously it's going to be a lot higher than it was 10 years ago. And I love, love, love the example that you gave because this is so important that students and parents need to hear again. You are evaluated based on the context of your high school. So if you look at this thing, students, called the school profile, every single high school has one. Every admissions office gets a copy of it so that they could evaluate you based on the context of your high school. And as Veronica said, look at your averages from your high school in terms of ACTs, SATs, and that should also help determine whether or not you want to submit because, again, they're evaluating you based on the context of your high school. And a follow-up question in terms of testing, Veronica, if I'm a student that took AP courses in 11th grade and I have AP scores that I feel are helpful in my overall application, am I permitted to submit AP scores to UChicago?
I tell students that, especially in the highly selective admissions process, there's what's required and what's not. I need your transcript. I need 2 teacher reps. I need essay. There's what's required. You got to send that in. That's being assessed. And then there's what is not, what is optional or not even mentioned. So testing is optional and other things are, maybe. For the maybe category, for the things that are optional, you take the option when you're going to shine, when it's going to look good. If you don't take the option, we wouldn't notice. It's not required. Not everyone's going to have it. So that means I think with any secondary testing for students who have predicted IB scores and AP scores and other types of testing, there's a testing section in the application. You can self-report whatever it is that you want. I think for some students, they're very proud of the scores as they would be proud of their grades or proud of other things. Sure, self-report, let us know. We don't require students to send any official test scores at the time that they apply. They self-report if they're sending the ACT or SAT. They can self-report any supplementary testing. We only ask for testing at the point of enrollment, and that's really because we're assessing for placement, for credit, for other things. So save the money. Just go ahead and self-report. But yes, whenever you are given the option to opt into something, you take the option when you're going to shine. I think that's the case too with schools that offer interviews. UChicago does not offer an interview, but I worked at Kenyon that does encourage students to take the opportunity to meet with an alum or to meet with a staff member or student. It's the same thing. If you are really comfortable chatting with someone you've just met, if you know a little bit about the college, if you know you're going to do well in that situation, take it. You always take the option when you will shine. And because it's not required, you can always not take the option if you think, like, for example, in an interview, oh, I'm a little bit shyer, especially around new people. I haven't done my research yet. I don't know about the college. Well, don't take it. No, that's totally fine. It's the same with anything that I think is optional or not required in the process.
Hey, podcast friends, if you've been enjoying the College Admissions Process podcast, I'm excited to share my new book, Straight from the Admissions Office, Insider Strategies for College Applications. It's packed with insights and tips from over 250 podcast episodes with admissions professionals designed to make the college process less overwhelming. Whether you're a student, parent, or college counselor, it's a valuable resource for navigating the admissions process. By grabbing a copy, you're also helping to support the podcast. The links are in the show notes. Thank you, and best wishes to all with the college admissions process.
Well, I appreciate the context in terms of if something is optional, you take it if it'll help you shine, right? Such as whether or not you would submit an AP score or standardized test in general. Now, I'm glad we touched upon evaluating based on the context of a student's high school. Veronica, how does UChicago evaluate the rigor of a student's academic curriculum, such as honors, AP, or IB, dual enrollment, relative to what's, again, available at their high school? And do you recalculate GPA? Or do you prefer to interpret coursework within, again, the context of the school environment?
Gosh, I used to recalculate GPA at the start of my career. I'm so glad don't have to do that anymore. We do not do that at UChicago. Gosh, I can't imagine the time that would take. Some schools do, and that's because they're trying to assess. Maybe they're looking at just your core academic courses. GPA scales are very different from school to school in the U.S. and abroad, so they're trying to put you all on the same scale. There are good reasons why we did it at my former institution, but we do not do that. And I think at most schools that have not only in selectivity, but the volume of applications that a UChicago would have, we're just not, there's no time to do that. But that's fine because you are assessing in a school environment, so you do get a sense of what is that curriculum offered and what's on the scale and what do we normally see from the applicants from that school. Students don't typically have choice about where they go to high school. It is the district you live in, or it is the school that your parents have decided you're going to. It's usually how it's going to go. I did not have choice entirely, right? I went to the school I went to. It had an AP curriculum, and we had 3 APs. I took all 3 out of 3. But, just a few miles north of me, there was a school that offered like 20 APs. 3 out of 20 would probably look really light for that school. Whereas 3 out of 3, I was doing the max that I could, maxing out rigor at my institution. That context is important. Whatever curriculum the school offers. And we see it all, right? So again, honors and AP and IB and dual enrollment, and we see it all. Whatever school you've landed at, you want to make sure that you are taking the classes at the rigor level that will prepare you for college. So we tell students, whatever that rigorous subset of courses are at your high school, you want to be sampling. And in your early years, your school might limit how you sample, or you're not sure how you might sample from those rigorous courses. Always start with your favorite subjects. If you love a certain subject, push the rigor in that subject because that should be an enjoyable experience. You like that subject. But that's what we're really thinking about. You've landed at the school you've landed at, probably not to your choice. And that school offers certain things in and out of the classroom. Can we see that where you have classroom choice, you are taking the rigor that makes it possible for you to be successful in your first year at college? That's a big part of how we assess.
Well, I really appreciate that answer, particularly the example that you gave of your own high school that offered 3 AP courses, which you took all 3. Congrats to you. But then there was that high school down the block, and there's always a high school down the block or down the road that offers 20 or more. And so you explained how you, again, evaluate students based on the context. If you're taking 3 out of 3, Well, that's really good because you basically took advantage of all the AP offerings at that high school compared to someone that has over 20. Maybe taking three, by the way, is still good, but maybe it's different in terms of how you're looking at those two students. Now, another piece of the overall application, of course, is these things called recommendation letters, which can sometimes feel formulaic. Veronica, what makes a letter of recommendation strong or memorable for UChicago's readers? And are there particular qualities that tend to align well with your values?
I think for any school that asks for recommendations as part of this process, because not all do, right? Only some. For schools that want recommendations, I think there are two things that always help make for a good letter. Number one, we want to make sure that we are learning things that we don't already know. I think for a lot of teachers, the hope is to fill a little bit of space. And so it's like, they took Calc AB, they got a 4 on an exam, and they got an A on the test. And I will know all of that information already from the transcript and from what the student tells me. But it's different to say, oh, I'm also the advisor for the math club. And he's the head of the math club, and these kids love him. They put his face on the math team t-shirt this year. Like, to get the anecdotes that we don't have behind the facts is so important. And it's such small things, the day-to-day classroom setting, the day-to-day opportunities that you see a student take. So I think number one, we want to maybe know things that we don't already know to be true from the rest of the application. And the second part, like I said, is really that we value anecdotes over adjectives. I write a lot of recommendations on behalf of the students I live and work with at UChicago. And it's hard. I know it's hard because I try and do it myself. If I'm going to say they're so kind and responsible, I would believe a recommender if they said that. But now I'm curious. Well, what's the anecdote that tells me you have come to the conclusion that they are kind and responsible? So if you think of adjectives, what are the stories that tell me, they're so hardworking and so responsible? And so that is true, I'm sure. But it is also then, I don't assign seats in my classroom, and she's always the one who chooses to sit front and center in the classroom. When she's given choice, she doesn't sit somewhere else. I really want not just the adjective, I want the anecdote that kind of proves how you've come to that conclusion.
Well, I really love that. The fact that you said, tell the story. Many teachers, and I remember when I was a teacher many, many years ago, I would talk about things, to your point, that are easily found, frankly, on the transcript or the activity sheet, right? I was a club advisor. I was a world language teacher. But I love what you said. Teachers, the admissions reps need to hear the story. You have the adjectives, fantastic. Now, tell the story in terms of why you feel that student, for example, maybe when they speak in class, everyone listens. They don't speak a lot, but when they do, it's so thoughtful that everyone listens. Or perhaps when you lesson plan, you have to keep that student in mind because of the thoughtful questions that they ask, right? Tell the story, give insight as opposed to just using the adjectives. I thought that was great, Veronica. Thank you for sharing. And institutional priorities is another thing that comes up a lot in conversation. So what institutional priorities are shaping admissions decisions right now, whether it's first-gen students, geographic diversity, or economic inclusion, and how do those priorities intersect with your overall enrollment strategies?
Sure. I think one of the cool things about being at a place like UChicago is that UChicago knows who they are. There's such a sense of place here, and the people who work here and attend here, everyone kind of buys in. Like, this is the nature of the place. So, for example, in academics, we have a core curriculum. You may like it, you may not, but that's who we are, and that's what we've decided. So those who would be a good fit here would like that. But I think UChicago is like that on every level possible. This is who we are, and we think it works for us. And if you like it too, then you're a good fit. And if you don't, that's okay. You might like other things. So I think in many ways, I've worked here on and off since near the start of my career for many years. I think in many ways, institutional priorities don't change greatly here, in that the institution is so firmly rooted in a sense of self. It's why we retain the supplemental questions that we have. It's just how we operate. But the landscape of the work changes because the landscape of the world changes and how we do the work. I think at an average college, there are small things that will change institutional priorities, and there are big things. For example, we have lots of students who come to UChicago currently who are very interested in molecular engineering. It's one of the most popular areas of study on campus, this great interdisciplinary STEM option. We did not have molecular engineering when I started at UChicago. It didn't exist as a major. When a school brings on a new major, they have to fill a new building. The newness will often shape the small ebb and flow. I think of what, back in the day, it was like, Can we really keep an eye to interdisciplinary science students? We have a major that we've started. We've got to start filling it. We got to have interest there. And how are we going to do that? So there's that small ebb and flow. The big ebb and flow changes with the nature of the work in bigger ways. The type of institution you are might determine how much those big pieces affect you. I think because UChicago is so rooted in a sense of self, I don't think we see huge impacts. But you see all the same small ones you would at any school, whether it's changes of majors or all of a sudden you have a championship athletic team, or all of a sudden your orchestra loses their double readers, or whatever it is. Those little things will affect your cycle. But I don't think big things affect us as much. There's such a sense of self here. And I think that helps us be kind of firmly rooted in who we are and who might be a good fit in the process.
Well, we appreciate that. And what could you share about your enrollment goals and how does your team approach the waitlist decisions based on those goals?
Sure. Size determines some of those goals. We're not a huge place, mid-size, just under 8,000 students. So you have under 2,000 students coming here, both first year, that's the bulk of our students, but also transfer students. We have a good sized transfer population on campus. So size will determine that. We're also a residential college in that we require a subset of our students to live on campus, that you only have so many beds. The size of campus versus the volume of applications we get determines a lot. There's just not a lot of space. Oddly enough, also, UChicago has a very high, what's called yield rate. So the students who are in our pool know that they're in UChicago's pool and know they've done that work to determine they're a good fit. So if I admit 10 students, 9 are coming, guaranteed. Like the 10th may even come, but 9 are definitely coming. It's one of the highest yield rates in the country, but I think because of that fit reason. So we also know not just that the size of the college and the size of the residency requirements determines how many we're admitting. But then there's also that whoever we admit is coming, like they are definitely coming. So those two things make for tough admissions decisions for certain. And then you layer on top of that the fit factor, making sure you get the right kids. All of that part of the process. It's challenging. No college wants to overdo it or underdo it. But I think for us in particular, we really want to get it right. We really want to make sure that the students who come here are the ones who are going to be happy to be here and thrive and really take advantage of the opportunities on campus. But there's a lot. I think the size of the college, the fact that so many kids who we admit do want to be here and that there's such a specific fit factor, it makes the enrollment process pretty tough.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that yield rate. Definitely one of the highest in the country, the highest that I've ever heard of. If you admit 10 students, you know that 9 are coming and maybe even 10. So that obviously makes it even more difficult for a student who's placed on a wait list because, first of all, when you're placed on a wait list, what you're telling the student is, hey, look, you're capable of coming to us, right? You definitely fit the criteria. You're definitely capable of handling the rigors of our academic program. We want to admit you, but we just don't have enough beds, as you put it, or seats. So what can a student do? Is there anything that a student can do? Or what should they do if they're on the wait list, if they absolutely, like so many of the students, want to be there, but of course they're trying to get off the wait list? Is there anything that they can do?
So I guess the two different levels of this. So at UChicago, if we give you a maybe decision, you are deferred from an early round or waitlisted in the regular round. If we give you the maybe, we give you instructions, and the ability to follow instructions is pretty key, right? Students starting to show me that they are ready to live and work independently at the college level. So we ask students, number one, to opt into the maybe. So if I waitlist you, it may be that you're like, that's okay. Other great schools have admitted me. You don't have to worry about considering me from the waitlist. Just take me off that list. Okay, perfect. You must opt in to have a decision from the waitlist. So some students opt out. After you've opted in, we ask students to send us an email where you write a continued letter of interest. You maybe refine your why UChicago answer from your supplement. Try and restate in your own words why you think really the school you should be at is UChicago. Depending on where we are in the year, sometimes there is an opportunity to get a new set of grades. I think for most of our students, that's not always a decision-making factor. They're getting your grades. They continue to get great grades. It's not always a surprise what those look like. But those, you have to opt in, and then we ask you to write in so that we get this continued letter of interest. From there, you've done your parts, and there's really nothing else. Students, they really want to do everything they can. They want to visit, and they want to send in more materials and additional recommendations. None of that is going to really make a difference. So I don't want you to put all of your effort there. You opt in, you send me that continued letter of interest. At the end of the process, I think for most schools that operate like ours, The hope is that you can build in room for the wait list. You want to be able to take some of those students. We know that many of the students we've admitted are going to say yes, but not all of them. So there is this window of room there. I think for students who have done what they're supposed to do, the end of the process then is out of your hands, because what most colleges will do, you never know how much room you will have. I think a lot of colleges don't love sharing waitlist information, waitlist numbers, because the numbers vary so much from year to year. But let's say we have room from the waitlist. In an office like ours, you will typically get the marching orders from the higher ups in your office, right? The people who manage enrollment. So you've got your VP and your dean and your director, whoever those people are. And they will say at one point in the spring, hey, we're going to have some room off the wait list. And they might give you marching orders as to who. So they may just say, we're going to have room. Can everyone go back, review the students who have opted into the wait list, who have sent you the letters? Who do you think has risen to the top? Kind of general call. But I've also worked at institutions where the call is very specific. We like reporting, for example, oh, we have all 50 states, but let's say you haven't enrolled a certain state yet. Does someone have someone from Alabama, from Montana, from Alaska? Well, guess what? Then that student base is going to get the opportunity to get that waitlist call. For schools that think about the nature of their academic majors and how they assess, all right, we have plenty for bio and econ, but do we have anyone who wants to study other things? Can we look for other things? Plenty of schools do that. Plenty of schools will use the waitlist as an opportunity to round out their class in some way. Do we think anyone is missing in this population? It would be good to have them here. You might get specific marching orders versus very general marching orders. But I think for us in particular at UChicago, follow the instructions, opt in, decide that you do or do not want to be considered off of that maybe decision, send in your continued letter of interest. And then from there, if we have room, we're going to go back to the files. I will also say that for many schools like UChicago, we do our work assigned by territory. If you don't know who your admissions officer is at the school you're applying to, I mean, this is a good point of the process where you should know who they are. You should know that there's a specific point person that you can email and get an answer from right away versus going in a general inbox that might have a very high volume of emails. We do that, and we encourage students to be in contact with their assigned admissions counselor who read their application and knows their story and knows the context.
Well, I appreciate the answer. Number one, follow the directions. Yes, you want to say that you are interested. You want that spot, for example, on the wait list. Send the email, the letter of continued interest. I also appreciate how you talked about giving the insights, really pulling the curtain back. Sometimes you're looking for a student from a certain state. And if you actually look at the UChicago website, you actually show the percentages of students that enroll from the different corners of the United States. And I believe it was about 18% international students as well. So that's definitely something that I would say falls under institutional priorities in terms of wanting that diversity. But also what you said in terms of knowing who your local rep is, knowing who the point person is extremely important, because that person is definitely part of the overall application review. And you never know, you just don't know, even at a UChicago that is so competitive, if that person could all of a sudden be at the table advocating for you because of steps that you've taken throughout the process. So we really appreciate that insight, Veronica. Thank you. And UChicago is known for meeting 100% of demonstrated financial need. Now, this sometimes is very confusing to a lot of students and families. So families sometimes assume a private university of your caliber will be out of reach financially. Veronica, can you walk us through how financial aid works in practice and what misconceptions you wish families better understood about cost and value?
At UChicago, as it is at just a handful of schools in the U.S., admissions and financial aid are really separate processes. So we are reading applications and making assessments and going through this process. And then our colleagues in financial aid are also receiving materials on behalf of some of the families who are applying for aid. If at the point we get through decision making and we're saying we think these are the students we're going to admit in this particular round, we will then let our financial aid colleagues know these are the letters that we might be preparing going forward. We also have, in addition to a need-based financial aid process, we happen to have a merit-based scholarship process. Not all selective institutions do, but we do. That happens in admissions, not in financial aid. Financial aid for us is a needs assessment. So what do income and assets look like in that family? What does that mean for what, if anything, is left over for college? And then how can we meet the needs of that family? In admissions, we will then also assess what kind of student person fit are they for UChicago. Can we, if anything, give some scholarship there? Kind of independent of financial aid. Anyone can get reviewed for merit scholarships automatically when you apply. I really feel right now for students looking at, especially at selective private institutions, the cost of our institutions is just astronomically. I mean, it's crazy to look at some of these numbers. I really feel for middle income families. It's such an odd thing to say because I think we spend so much energy and effort thinking about our lowest income students. Well, if a student who is very low income gets into a school like UChicago, a school that meets full need, we do it without loans. You've hit that jackpot, right? So we can fully fund you to come here. And then the opposite student, the student who's maybe not applying for aid, whose family can cover the cost of college, if they get in, they can come here. Middle income Americans have a really, really hard time being able to afford the average private school in cost. The forms that financial aid gets is saying you can pay something, and that is often something that feels higher than the family is comfortable paying. Like, I don't know. I get that the forms say I have that to spare, but I don't really feel that I have that to spare. My cousin went to an institution that met full need, but really in that middle income group, like it really felt more than what his family was able to pay for. They were also a loan-free institution. So you don't have to take out loans at a place like UChicago. We take what would be the normal loan amount and replace it with grant. It's gift money you don't have to pay back. But you don't lose your eligibility to take out loans. And so what my cousin did at another college that was loan-free, he took out some loan to reduce the yearly cost to his family. But it wasn't removing costs, it was delaying it because he took out those loans post-graduation. He did then at that point have to figure out, well, now we're going to pay this now versus paying it in the past. There are cool tips and tricks like that. You can reduce the cost of a college, especially a loan-free institution like UChicago. But I really do feel for that middle income group. I wish more families made use of the net price calculators that are still on college websites. So let's say you are looking at an institution, particularly one that has a high cost. You can go, right? Parents, family members who are helping with the cost of college can go on the website. You can go to UChicago, search UChicago net price calculator. And you could enter in some basic income and asset information and get an estimate of what your need-based financial aid would be if you were admitted to that college. That is a really nice number to sit down and talk about as a family and say, this is a range we can make happen, right? So let's go forward in this process. Let's apply to this college. Let's figure this out. There may be a range that's like, well, that's a little bit tight. We can go into the process, but the hope is that you would get some merit scholarship from the school, or we would be applying to outside merit scholarships from organizations, or you're going to have to work part-time, or we're going to have to take out more loans. We don't talk about finances in families. Why would a kid ever have talked about finances with their parent? So it's a weird time, but I wish more families really used that option, the net price calculator. There are some really, on behalf of some colleges, there are also really cool tools. You can be on My Intuition, simpler forms, but it gives you a wider range of families like ours who have sent their students to these colleges. This is the range in which you want to do some of that work at the start of the process, not just at the end. Because if you have applied to the wrong schools, quote unquote, based on finances, not just admissions decisions, you get a bunch of yeses that aren't actually yeses because you can't afford to go to the school. So I do think, for our full pay and low income students, they can come. They could be a place like UChicago can be a really realistic option for middle income families who are looking at just skyrocketing costs of especially private colleges. You have to do the work ahead of time. You have to use the net price calculator. You have to talk about money for the first time ever in your family. You have to make some decisions about how the list is going to be built, not just on admissions decisions or preferences, but also realistically, we want to be able to afford to go to the schools that we're gonna apply to on our list. There's a lot of work that has to go into play there. They are attainable. It's reachable. You can get to these schools, but for that middle, you're going to have to do extra work to make sure that it's an affordable, realistic option.
Well, I think that's tremendous insight and great advice in terms of using the net price calculator. It's interesting because I speak to a lot of parents and I ask them, have you used the net price calculator or do you even know what it is? It's actually quite astonishing to know how many people have never heard of it. It is mandated. Basically, every single college or university has to have it. Most of them have it on their website through the financial aid tab, or just search University of Chicago, net price calculator, or net price calculator, insert whatever school you're thinking of applying to, and fill it out, be honest. And it gives you not necessarily to the penny, right? Because it does use averages, but it gives you a solid indication in terms of what you will actually pay. And those are conversations, to your point, Veronica, that need to happen often and early, because the worst thing that I hear on the podcast is that someone is fortunate enough to be admitted to a reach school only to then find out that, guess what, they can't afford it. And so
Oh,
that's just
yeah,
a
it's the
terrible
worst.
thing for the people, for the families, for the people on the admissions side. So definitely do your homework. Now, Veronica, you meet with countless students and families throughout the year. Looking back, what do you wish more students and parents asked you during those many conversations?
I wish more students and families really thought about the process from their point of view, not just the college's point of view. So we have lots of students who will ask us essentially, what do I have to do that you want? So we'll use the example of class choice, curriculum choice. I'm heading into my senior year, my final year of high school. I've met my requirements. Now I have choice in my schedule. I know that you require math in your core curriculum, and I probably should take a math, but I really love my English and history classes so much more, and I want to double up there. I'd rather drop math. What should I do? They're trying to get a response from us about what we prefer. And that is such a backwards way to do this process. You as a student should get to say, I've met my requirements and I love my English and history classes and I want to take them. And therefore, I'm going to look for colleges that are comfortable and excited about that choice. I don't know why we are spending all of our time trying to fit what we want and what we love into others, in this case, colleges' preferences. If you meet those preferences, great, right? If in a liberal arts institution that has a core curriculum and you love taking all subjects, that all just naturally is happening. So UChicago can be a really good fit. But guess what? For the student who's like happy to never take a subject again or wants to double up on other, we also have more comfortable general education curriculum colleges. We have open curriculum colleges. I wish more students and families worked from their vantage point. Here's who I am and what I'm good at and what I want. Now, out of the thousands upon thousands of colleges in the US, I should get to craft a list of colleges that desperately want me back at the choices I make. Whereas I think certainly at a highly selective institution, what we usually hear is, what do you want? And I always think that's so odd. I'm like, what does it matter what we want? You have something that you want, and you should get to act on that. And that choice should be yours, and you should find colleges that are excited about that choice. I wish more families didn't work in the reverse that we see. And maybe we see it a lot because we're a highly selective institution. What do you want? But the other option is for me to say what we want, what a liberal arts core curriculum college wants, and for you to do it and still not get it. So now you did something you didn't want to do. You don't get in. You're doubly miserable. That's the worst outcome. Why do that? I think you should be who you are and do what you love and make good choices, but then find the colleges that would be excited about you back. Why wouldn't we operate? I wish more people operated in that way.
Well, I think that's tremendous advice. Switch it, not talk about what the college prefers, but students, this is a reflective process.
Mm.
What is it that you want? What is it that you prefer? What is it that makes you tick? And then based on that reflection, find the colleges that meet your needs, right? You want to make sure that you find a college that meets your needs as opposed to, as Veronica said, worrying so much about what that individual college wants, because if it's not in line with who you are, it's just not the right fit. And we say it all the time. There's over 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States alone. There's more than one school for each and every student, but not every school is necessarily the right fit for you. So again, reflect. What is it that you prefer? And go out there and find that college or university, because there are so many to choose from. Now, Veronica, this has been a phenomenal conversation, as I knew it would be. Before I get to the last question, I always like to ask, is there a question that I didn't ask today that you wish I had about the University of Chicago or college admissions in general, or maybe a topic that didn't come up that you'd like to share with our listeners now?
Mm-hmm. No, I think we covered everything. I already mentioned I'm a big fan of reading applications. It's one of my favorite parts of my job. And I particularly love working on essays. I do a lot of essay work with students in schools and organizations. I will say, kind of a piece of advice for families and students. The students I work with will often spend months working on a personal statement. It's built into their English class or a unit that the college counseling office is doing or that the organization they work with is doing. Months on a personal statement that's 650 words. How long do you think it takes me to read 650 words? I think it's such an unfair imbalance in the workload that you spend months working on something that takes me moments to read. I work with a couple organizations where you basically have an essay boot camp. Like in 1 week, you're done with your essay, right? We do a presentation. We talk about the goals of the essays. You outline something, you write it, we put it away, you edit it. It is done. I really wish more students were capable of doing that. I know that the personal statement feels very high stakes. There's this one grand thing you get to say about yourself that goes to so many colleges that accept that one main personal statement. But for schools that have supplements, like UChicago, the personal statement is great in that I get to learn about you, but the supplement is important because then I get to see whether or not you're a good fit for my institution. And students work such reverse order, months on a personal statement that takes moments to read. And then all of a sudden they realize because the schools they have on their list come fall, all of a sudden they have tons of supplements to do and they rush the supplements. And that is such the reverse order. If the supplements are going to be so important at the schools who want those essays, I give you full permission to just crank through and put away that personal statement and make sure that you are making time for the supplements that are coming. They are such a high impact and they are done so in such a rushed fashion. I really wish we were able to operate in reverse order. I will see students edit that personal essay to death. This word, that word, this thing. And I'm like, oh, my poor babies, I'm going to read that in just seconds, right? Seconds. So I guess that's the one piece of advice I would give on essays.
Well, that's tremendous advice. And you're absolutely right. That's another thing that comes up a lot. People spend so much time on the personal statement because I guess it's the one essay that is shared with all schools. And then they'll come across a UChicago or another competitive school and they see, oh my God, I have to write so many more supplementals, and they want to just rush through it, which is a huge mistake because I think there are so many great pieces of advice that came out of this conversation. One of them is really that supplemental, and it's so different at UChicago, the way you guys handle it, but it's really where you're going to get to learn the differences between all of these applicants that are so highly academic in terms of how they think and how they're going to contribute to this wonderful thing we call the UChicago community. So, Veronica, this was awesome. You're terrific. Unfortunately, it does lead us to that last question, which always is, what are your top 3 pieces of advice? And you've given so many already, but what are your top 3 pieces of advice for students and their families going through the college admissions process?
I think my main pieces of advice would be for family members, for parents. You're so influential on this process. The kids they want to do the right thing and they want your approval. And I read lots of essays. I see lots of applications where the student, they're really trying their best, but they feel pressure. They have expectations from others. Like it can be a lot. I think anything as parents and family members we can do to minimize that pressure and stress makes such a big difference. I would say number one, something that I've seen recommended from other admissions reps, but also I've seen happen functionally well in my family, is to pick a day and time of the week, right? Like let's say Sunday after dinner is our weekly talk about this admissions process time. And student and parents are allowed to ask the question, where are you with the essay? When are the financial aid documents due? What are our to-dos for the next week? Like just make it a work appointment, like get it done and then put it away. The rest of we shouldn't have to be worrying about this on a daily basis. Pick a day and time, make that your work time towards admission, and then it's fair game. During that time, you can ask each other questions, set the to-dos for the next week. Just set that time. I heard someone once on a panel say many years ago, and I still say it, this is probably it for parents. This is probably the last year that child will live full-time in your house. Because now they're going to go to college and they might spend their summer studying abroad or doing internships. And then when they graduate, they might go to grad school and then live in another city, state, or country. This is it. Do you want to spend your last year with your baby in a high stress environment? That's really not what we're aiming for. So I would say pick your time, do your work, and enjoy the rest of your time with your young person. I would say there are lots of parts of the process where family members can be really helpful. So for example, if your family's applying for financial aid, your child can't get that info in. You have to get that info in. You have to get it in at the right time. There's a lot that you have to do. There are probably parts of the process where you're not going to be helpful. I think parents and family members should never edit essays. There are other people who are doing that good work with your child. There are other people who are helping them in a professional manner. I know we want the best for our babies, but if you've never worked in college admissions and you never worked in a high school academic setting, and I get that you can edit for grammar and structure, but you're not part of the process. I think essays are one place where you can bow out and you can spend your time helping your child stay organized, but also doing the parts of the process that you are responsible for. I will also say, I mean, this has just grown over time, but then also in a highly selective process, very pronounced, the stress piece. Whatever you can do to reinforce to your child that you just love them as is, that you'd be happy with whatever outcome comes from this college process, that you want for them, I get a life where they can take care of themselves and be happy and fulfilled and maybe successful. But the amount of essays that I read, personal statements, where students are really grappling with this, loss of love and stress, like they just really feel like for who they are, the people in their life really don't support and love them the way they should. It's just heartbreaking to read so many of those essays. So I think we're always acting in the best interests of our babies. But whatever we can do to reinforce that, like, I love you as is, and I love you no matter what this is going. And I love you no matter what college you choose and whatever major you choose and whatever thing you go into. I want you to be happy, well, and successful, but I know there are lots of ways to do that. I think any just reaffirming of that at this point of this process would mean the world to students, because they pour it all out in their personal statements. And we read a lot of things that just, it makes me sad to know that a student is sad about parts of this process. So those are my pieces of advice for parents, for family members. I think students are doing the things they need to do. Parents, family members, let's make it so that they can do that work in a maybe less stressful situation.
Well, I think that's tremendous advice, particularly the last piece. And if families actually took that advice, we would certainly help to lessen the stress in this thing that we call college admissions. And, a lot of times it's not about the student. A lot of times it's just, you're looking to fill 2,000 seats. You have 40,000 qualified applicants. Not everyone is going to be able to come to your school. And so, again, do everything you can to fill that application comprehensively, but be tight as a family, work through it together, understand the institutional priorities, understand that, yes, we feel that it's all about the student and it's a lot about the student, but it's also a lot about the institutions and in terms of their numbers and things that are just out of the family's control. Veronica, you're awesome. This was terrific. I'm so glad that I finally got you on. Looking forward to having you in the future for a follow-up episode. Thank you so much for everything today.
Always happy to chat. Thank you for having us, John.
My pleasure. And to everyone out there, good luck with the college search. Take care all, and best wishes.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The CAP. Thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success.